They laughed at the homeless man begging for food, but none of them knew. He once held the record that left racing legends humiliated. This is Fallen Stories, where truth breaks arrogance and forgotten lives rise again. Subscribe now because the next story might just change how you see the world. The city sidewalk was alive with noise, honking taxis, the smell of fried food from street carts, the chatter of hurried pedestrians. But in one shadowed corner, against the cracked brick of an old building, sat a man most people tried not to see. His name was Daniel Hayes. Tattered jacket, mud-stained shoes, a cardboard sign scrawled with shaky letters. "Can I fix it for food?" His beard was ragged, his hair streaked with gray. His hands, though weathered, carried calluses, not of idleness but of work once done at impossible speed. But the world didn't see that. To them, Daniel was just another man lost to the streets. Little did they know those same hands once gripped a steering wheel at 200 miles an hour. A group of young men passed, their laughter sharp, cutting through the cold air. One of them, tall with a leather jacket and flashy watch, slowed as he saw Daniel's sign. "Fix it for food?" the man sneered. "What are you gonna fix, old man?" "My sneakers?" The group howled. One even tossed a crumpled dollar bill at Daniel's feet. Not in kindness, but mockery. Daniel lifted his eyes, calm but heavy. "I can fix more than you think." The words were soft, almost drowned by traffic, but they carried a weight none of the men recognized. It wasn't a boast, it was a promise. And one day soon, it would be proven. People kept moving. A businessman with a sleek briefcase glanced, then looked away quickly. A woman clutching shopping bags crossed to the other side of the street. Nobody wanted to know Daniel's story. And yet, Daniel sat steady, as though waiting. Not for pity, but for a moment he knew would come. Because under the grime, under the weight of the streets, Daniel Hayes still carried a secret. A name once cheered in stadiums. A record still whispered in garages. But that secret was buried. Until arrogance dug it up. And arrogance, it turned out, wore a designer jacket and drove a sports car. Late afternoon. The roar came first, a throaty engine purring as it turned onto the street. Heads turned, even pedestrians paused to watch the sleek red machine roll to the curb. It was a brand new track-tuned roadster, polished like liquid fire. And behind the wheel sat Ethan Cross. He was a rising star in the local racing scene. Early 20s, rich family swagger in every step. To the crowd, he was talent. To Daniel, he was arrogance on wheels. Ethan revved the engine once, letting the noise thunder down the street. His friends leaned against the hood, snapping photos, basking in borrowed glory. That's when Ethan spotted Daniel. "Well, well," Ethan smirked, stepping out, his leather shoes clicking against the pavement. "Look at this. We got ourselves a pit crew dropout." His friends snickered. Ethan waved at Daniel's sign. Can I fix it for food?" "Tell you what, old man, why don't you fix my car? Maybe I'll throw you some scraps." The crowd chuckled nervously. Pedestrians slowed. Phones came out. Someone was already recording. Daniel looked at the gleaming car, then back at Ethan. His eyes were calm. "Your left rear alignment is off. The suspension will fail within a month." Silence. Ethan's smirk faltered. "Excuse me?" Daniel pointed with one cracked finger, left rear. "Too much negative camber." "Whoever tuned it didn't balance the weight right," the crowd murmured. Some tilted their heads as if trying to see what Daniel saw. How could a homeless man glance at a car and diagnose it instantly? Ethan's friends burst out laughing. "Man, this guy thinks he's an engineer. You hear that? Homeless pit boss over here?" Ethan sneered again, regaining his swagger. "Old man, I don't need advice from someone who can't afford a meal." But a voice from the crowd spoke up. "He's right," a young mechanic whispered. "I can see it too." Left rears tilted. Murmurs spread. People zoomed in with their phones. The arrogance that had fueled Ethan's mockery was now teetering under suspicion. Ethan stiffened. "Even if you're right, so what? Doesn't change the fact you're nothing. A nobody." Daniel's eyes narrowed, but his voice stayed calm. "Once I was nobody. Then the track made me somebody. Now, I'm back to nobody." But the track remembers the words hung heavy, confusing some, intriguing others. Because Daniel wasn't just a man with knowledge, He was a man with history, one Ethan was about to regret mocking. Ethan crossed his arms. If you're such an expert, prove it. Fix my car right here. Or better yet. He smirked wider, an idea striking him like lightning. Why don't you race me? Gasps cut the air. Phones lifted higher. Daniel looked up slowly, his weathered eyes locking onto Ethan's arrogant grin. His silence felt heavier than 100 insults. You don't want that, Daniel said finally. Ethan barked a laugh. Oh, I want it. What's the matter, old man? Afraid the streets will eat you alive? The crowd cheered. Arrogance had turned into theater. The homeless man against the racing prodigy. Ethan thought he was setting up a joke, but he was building the stage for his own humiliation. Daniel sat back against the brick wall, eyes lowering once more. His voice was barely above a whisper, but everyone close enough heard it. I don't race for pride anymore. I race for survival. But if you force me back behind the wheel, you won't like how it ends. The crowd erupted with chatter. Phones buzzed as clips uploaded online. Ethan's friends urged him on, grinning, smelling victory before the engines even started. But Daniel knew something they didn't. He wasn't just a homeless man, he was a ghost of the track. And ghosts always come back to haunt the living. By nightfall, the street corner where Daniel sat was no longer just another block. It had become a stage. Clips of Ethan mocking him and Daniel's calm reply were already circulating online. At a nearby diner, TV screens replayed the footage. The shaky phone camera zoomed on Daniel pointing at Ethan's car, his quiet words replayed again and again. Your left rear alignment is off. Mechanics, racers, and car enthusiasts across the city started commenting. Who is this guy? He's not wrong. You can hear the suspension dragging on idle. Old-timer knows his stuff. And yet on the sidewalk, Ethan basked in the crowd's attention. He revved his engine again and again, letting the sound echo like thunder. Tomorrow night, Ethan declared loudly, me and this old man. We'll settle it the only way that matters. On the street, the crowd cheered. Phones flashed. A hashtag was already forming. Ethan thought it was his spotlight. But the city was already whispering about Daniel instead. Daniel sat under the awning of an abandoned storefront, rain beginning to drizzle. He wasn't scrolling through phones or watching the buzz. He just sat, staring at his cracked hands. A small boy approached holding a sandwich wrapped in paper. Mister, I saw you on my brother's phone. Are you really going to race him? Daniel's eyes softened. He accepted the sandwich with both hands, bowing his head slightly. I never run from a race, he said quietly. But sometimes, I don't go looking for one either. The boy's eyes widened. Were you a racer? Daniel smiled faintly, chewing slowly. The taste was simple, but it filled more than his stomach. It stirred memories. The boy didn't know. Once upon a time, Daniel Hayes wasn't just a racer. He was the man every racer feared to face. As the drizzle turned heavier, Daniel's mind drifted back. The roar of engines, the smell of burning rubber, the blur of lights on a track under midnight skies. He remembered trophies lined up on dusty shelves, newspaper headlines screaming his name. Hayes breaks record again. He remembered the final crash, the one that twisted metal and bone alike, the one that forced him off the track forever. And then, the silence. The sponsors left. The money dried. The fans forgot. Daniel was left with nothing but scars, both on his body and his pride. And now, fate had dragged him back to the starting line. Not for glory, but for justice. The next morning, Ethan stood outside his garage, the smell of gasoline and rubber thick in the air. His friends circled his car, polishing every inch until it gleamed. Tonight's the night, Ethan grinned, running a hand through his slick hair. I'll humiliate him in front of everyone. Nobody will ever talk about that bum again. His friend chuckled. Careful, man. People online are saying he's legit. Ethan scoffed. He's nothing. Just a washed-up loser pretending he knows cars. I'll burn him on the first straight. But beneath his bravado, Ethan felt the pressure. The crowd wasn't just coming to watch him win. They were coming to see if the old man's secret was true. Arrogance loves an audience, but an audience can turn. and Ethan had no idea how fast that turn could come. That afternoon, as Daniel sat fixing the wheel of an abandoned shopping cart for coins, a man in oil-stained overalls approached. "You're Hayes, aren't you?" the mechanic asked, eyes wide with recognition. Daniel looked up slowly, wary. "You got me confused with someone else." The mechanic shook his head. "No, I remember. I was at Daytona 94, you came out of nowhere and smoked everyone. I've never seen driving like that again." Daniel's lips pressed thin, but he didn't deny it. The mechanic leaned in. "If you're really going to race that kid tonight, you'll need wheels. And I think I've got something for you." He gestured toward his garage across the street. Inside, under a tarp, was a dusty, dented machine. An old racer. Once Daniel's, long forgotten, now half-rusted. Daniel's heart clenched. His hands trembled as he ran a palm across the hood. Memories roared back louder than the rain. The crowd thought he had nothing. But he still had a ghost from his past. A car built for legends, not for streets. By dusk, the word had spread like wildfire. Social feeds buzzed. Flyers were printed. Even local radio whispered about the homeless man versus rising star showdown. The location was set. An abandoned stretch of industrial road, wide enough for side-by-side speed, hidden enough from the law. Cars lined up along the sidewalks, neon lights reflected off wet asphalt. Engines growled like caged animals waiting to be unleashed. Ethan's red roadster was front and center, shining under the glow. He stood next to it, grinning wide, waving to phones and cameras. And then Daniel arrived, not on foot this time, but behind the wheel of his battered, rusted racer. Its paint was faded, its headlights dim. But when the engine coughed to life, there was a note in its growl that turned heads, a note only seasoned ears could hear. The crowd saw a junkyard car, but those who knew engines felt a chill. That sound wasn't just an engine, it was history awakening. Phones lifted higher, whispers grew louder. "Is that his car? No way. That thing can't even hit 60. I don't know, man." "Listen to it, that's no regular engine." Ethan laughed loud, pointing at the rusted frame. "You're kidding me. That's your ride? I'll smoke you before the first corner." Daniel rolled down the cracked window, his face calm, his eyes locked on Ethan. "I don't need to smoke you. I just need to remind you." The words hit Ethan harder than he expected. Engines revved. Tires screeched as drivers warmed up. The smell of gasoline thickened in the night air. The starter, a young man with a bandana and flashlight, stepped between the two cars, arms raised. On the left, Ethan grinned, revving hard, the red glow of his dashboard lighting his cocky smirk. On the right, Daniel sat still, hands steady on the worn steering wheel, his breath slow and even. He wasn't there for fame, not for pride. He was there for justice, for every laugh, every insult, every dollar tossed at his feet. In seconds, the world would see not a homeless man, but the ghost of a racing legend reborn. The flashlight dropped. Engines roared. The tires screamed as smoke filled the night. The crowd shouted, their voices lost in the thunder of horsepower. Ethan shot forward, confident, headlights blazing. Daniel's car rolled slow at first, as if waking up. But then, the engine howled, the gears clicked, and the rusted beast lunged like a predator freed from its cage. The race had begun. And Ethan's humiliation was already written on the asphalt. The night air split open as both cars surged forward. Tires screamed, smoke curled into the street lamps, and the crowd erupted in wild cheers. Ethan's red roadster leapt ahead instantly, shiny body cutting the air like a blade. His friends screamed with joy, pumping fists into the night sky. Behind him, Daniel's rusted machine seemed sluggish at first, its old frame rattling, headlights dim. Some in the crowd even laughed. "Look at that junk! He's done before it starts." But then, Daniel shifted. The sound changed. A guttural growl rose from the engine, deeper, sharper, alive. The car lunged forward with sudden ferocity, closing the gap. The crowd thought they were watching a race, but they were witnessing a resurrection. The industrial road curved left, concrete walls pressing in tight. Ethan gripped his wheel, smirking, his tires hugging the bend with precision. He glanced in his mirror and froze. Daniel's car was there, not just keeping up, but gliding closer, its engine singing like a beast uncaged. Daniel's hands were steady on the wheel, his body relaxed, eyes laser-focused. His movements weren't forced, and they were instinct, carved into him by years on the track. The crowd gasped as Daniel closed the gap through the turn, his rusted car holding traction, where Ethan's expensive machine slid slightly wide. "Impossible," one mechanic whispered. "That kind of control, that's not street racing. That's pro-level." Ethan's money bought him speed, but Daniel's scars had bought him mastery. Engines howled as both cars tore onto the straight stretch. Ethan slammed his accelerator, dashboard lights blurring. His car screamed at top speed. But Daniel wasn't behind anymore. He was beside him. The crowd roared as the two cars thundered side by side, sparks flying as their frames nearly brushed. Ethan's grin faltered. Sweat trickled down his temple. He yelled into the roar, "You can't beat me! You're nothing!" Daniel turned his head just enough, his voice calm, carried by the hum of his engine. "I was nothing until the track made me something. Tonight, I'm everything you fear." And with one flawless gear shift, Daniel's car surged forward, leaving Ethan half a length behind. For the first time, Ethan tasted the one thing arrogance can't stomach: being left behind. Phones shook as people screamed into their cameras. "He's passing him! The old man's taking him! Who is he?" the mechanic from earlier whispered, voice trembling with awe. "I know who he is, Daniel Hayes." They called him the Iron Hand. He broke records in the 90s. Nobody could touch him. The name spread like fire through the crowd. Daniel Hayes? No way. The legend? Impossible, but it's him. And in that moment, Daniel was no longer invisible. The city remembered. The homeless man they mocked was transforming before their very eyes into a legend reborn. The finish line loomed ahead, but one brutal hairpin curve stood in the way. Ethan gritted his teeth, veins bulging. He yanked the wheel, tires shrieking, sparks spraying as his car drifted wide. Daniel's eyes narrowed. He didn't fight the turn, he danced with it. His car flowed through the curve like water-down stone, smooth and flawless, hugging the inside line. When the two cars shot out of the curve, the result was undeniable. Ethan's roadster was half a car length behind. The crowd erupted. Ethan roared, slamming his accelerator, but his car screamed in protest. The suspension wobbled, exactly where Daniel had warned him. Sparks burst from the rear, the wheel alignment buckling under the pressure. Gasps filled the night. Ethan fought for control, but his car skidded, slowed, and wavered. Daniel's machine, steady as steel, tore ahead. Arrogance had broken itself. Precision had prevailed. The crowd counted down in screams, lights flashing, phones recording every second. 10. 9. 8? Daniel's rusted car flew across the finish line, its engine roaring victory, its headlights blazing like twin ghosts in the night. Ethan's car limped across seconds later, sparks flying, his face twisted with disbelief and humiliation. The street exploded with noise, cheers, shouts, people chanting Daniel's name. "Hayes! Hayes! Hayes!" Ethan slammed his fist against the wheel, sweat pouring, his pride crushed under the weight of reality. Daniel stepped out of his car, the crowd rushing forward. Flashlights lit his weathered face. "Are you really Daniel Hayes?" someone shouted. "Why are you out here?" another asked, eyes wide. Daniel stood tall, his jacket torn, his shoes ragged, but his eyes burned with calm fire. "I had everything once. Fame, money, glory. Then I lost it all. But I never lost what mattered." He placed a hand on the roof of his car, the rusted beast still ticking with heat. "Skill, discipline, respect. That's what racing taught me. And that's what arrogance will never understand." Ethan stumbled from his car, face pale, sweat dripping. His friends avoided his eyes. The same crowd that once cheered him now looked away, ashamed of ever backing his arrogance. For the first time, Ethan wasn't the star. He was the warning. Daniel looked around at the young faces holding phones, eyes wide. Never judge a man by what he's lost. Judge him by what he carries forward. Silence followed, not out of doubt, but out of respect. Daniel didn't ask for applause. He didn't smile. He simply picked up his jacket, slid back into his car, and drove slowly into the night. The legend had no need for glory, his justice was already written in tire marks on the asphalt. Arrogance may own the moment, but respect, skill, and truth will always own the finish line. This was Fallen Stories. If Daniel's comeback shook you, subscribe now.